Hello everyone and welcome to today's SAP TechEd workshop. My name is Julia Russo and I am part of the SAP Community team. I'm your host during this call. Our topic of the session is developing apps with SAP Ui5. And we are going to record the session so you can re-watch it at any time. Our speakers for today are Florian Vogt and Martin Heuser, and they will show you how to build a Freestyle app in the cloud using SAP Ui5, following our latest recommendations and updated best practices. Now, before I hand over, I would like to make you aware of the SAP Community, an external-facing platform where you can connect to other members and also follow the SAP TechEd and the SAP Ui5 tag to stay up to date on that field. So if you have any questions, please use the Q&A button in the menu bar down below, where you can already raise questions during the presentation. So Florian, Martin, the stage is yours.
Hello everyone, here's Florian speaking. We are really happy about that you're today joining our session today. And we want to give you a short introduction about us, who we are, and so we are all both developers in the Ui5 area, and we had a nice TechEd session in December where we did a workshop for lots of developers on TechEd, this year in virtual TechEd. And after this event, we received lots of feedback that this workshop should be repeated, and that also other developers can join this experience and get a first touch or get some new best practices after the event. And that was the reason why we say, okay, let's repeat this workshop. And to give you in short how we want to do it, this workshop, we will, the first part, Martin will do the coding, and you can have a look which tools we are using, which code styles we are using, and how we code Ui5 applications. And the second part, myself will take over, and at the end we will have a standalone cloud application deployed into the cloud, and we will show you how easy it is using SAP technologies to achieve this goal. Said that, it's a really short goal what we have today. So we will learn how to develop Ui5 applications, and we will use the latest tooling, which is called the SAP Business Application Studio as the development environment. And we build a small application with to get that you get familiar with the latest tools and also the recommendations from our side. Yeah, the cool thing is that this workshop is completely public available at the GitHub account, at the public GitHub account from SAP. So you can go and you can go also afterwards. You can visit this page and go over the exercises and have a look on that. So this is the course, and you can go over the sessions, all the coding, all the steps which we will do now in this course are written down there in text and code. And so you will have lots of things where you can have a knowledge base, what you do in this course. And if you have one step where we're a little bit faster than you want to be, you can go there and see how we did it, and you can read it in more silent. The course is structured that we have, first of all, we have a short getting started, and then we will do for you the whole basic setup, and you will see how easy it is. And afterwards, we will, for every exercise, we will have more advanced steps, and you will see how powerful Ui5 can be if you want to write enterprise-ready applications for you. Said that, I hand over to Martin. Martin, let's start.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Florian. So let me start the sharing. Okay. Florian, can you confirm? Can you see it?
It's there.
Okay, perfect. So hello, everybody. My name is Martin, and I will start with the first half of this exercise and this workshop for developing apps with SAP Ui5. And as Florian already gave an introduction over the documentation, let's directly get into it. So if you want to repeat some steps of this workshop afterwards by your own, you have the possibility to get every information here, and also the requirements are also described. So there are some requirements upfront to get started, and that will be to get a free trial account on the SAP Cloud platform. You will find a link here. Also to enable Cloud Foundry and set up a Business Application Studio. And of course, you need to be excited about the power of SAP technologies to make your developer life easier. Okay, but I said that, let's get started. There is one step that I've been doing up front, and that is setting up my workspace. So I'll just quickly go over the screenshots to show you how this actually would look like, creating that on your own. So once you've set up your account and enable Business Application Studio, you are basically able to create a new dev space. And all I did here upfront was creating a new dev space called Ui5 Development and starting that dev space in the Business Application Studio. As for the first time, this might take a few minutes, and I was already preparing this upfront that you can directly get started. So I will jump directly into my Business Application Studio. And this is how it looks like. Once you open it for the first time, you get this IDE with an empty workspace, and you have the possibility to start coding different applications. So what we want to do today is we want to create a Ui5 Freestyle application. So we start from a template. Okay, so now I have the possibility to choose between different project types. So I will choose for my Ui5 Freestyle application, SAP Fiori Freestyle project. I will select it and I will say start.
Martin, could you a little bit zoom in? Because you have a perfect, yes.
Perfect. Okay, so next up, I want to choose my running environment, and I want to create a SAP Ui5 application. And I want Cloud Foundry as running environment. So I will go to the next step. And now I have the possibility to choose a project name. As we're referring this workshop to the TechEd that took place in 2020, I will stick with the name TechEd 2020 for now as a project name. And I will go to the next step. So next up, we are prompted to fill our app router configuration. And here we will keep the standalone app router, and we will see later on how we can actually configure that. And next up, we will be on the basic attributes page. And here we have the possibility to define a custom name for our HTML5 module. I will call this one Sensor Manager. And I don't want to use authentication for now to keep it simple. And today we want to create a Ui5 application that gives an overview over different sensor data, as we are a small company that delivers some different ice houses. So let's call our namespace Keep Cool. Okay. Next up, we are asked to enter a view name for our application. So we don't want to keep view 1 here, but maybe let's just call it app. And we don't want to add a data service for now, as we want to focus on the Ui5 implementation today. And we will just use a client-sided JSON model for this application here to keep it simple. Okay, so now we've successfully created our application, and in the lower right corner, you can see here we are prompted with a project has been generated. What would you like to do with it? And we can say open a new workspace. And after a few seconds, we can see that our file explorer now contains the project. And we can see the app router which we've configured is there. And we can see also the basic project files for our Ui5 applications have been initialized. We have the web app folder, and we have the different files that are necessary, and the controller folder, the view folder. And we can see the files the way we configured it in the template that we created in the Business Application Studio. So before we actually start with the coding, we want to already check if we can run our application to see if everything works. So in the Business Application Studio, we can choose this play button in this bar on the left. And on the run configurations, we can click this little plus icon here to create a new configuration. So in the top here, we are being prompted what we would like to run. And we can run the module that we just created. So I will select this one. Next up, we will need to select a runnable file. I will choose the index.html here. And next up, we are prompted to select the Ui5 version. And of course, we want to use the latest Ui5 version to get everything out of Ui5. And we have, in addition, the possibility to define a name for our run configuration. I will just stick with the default here. And we can see on the left that the run configuration could be successfully generated. And the advantage here is that you could also consider to create different run configurations for different modules, or even for the same module on different versions to do, for example, compare different features, for example. So now that we created the run configuration, I actually want to start the run configuration. This might take a few seconds, but we can see now after a few seconds, it says a service listening. Click expose and open in this lower right corner. So I will do that. And I now have the possibility to enter an optional description for the port, but I will just enter that for now. And just after a few seconds, we can see we've basically initialized our Ui5 application without any content for now, but we can see that it is already running as expected, and we've successfully completed the first step of this exercise. And we continue to start with the basic Ui5 configuration and view creation. So back to the actual coding, I want to take a quick look at the index.html, because currently we can see that this is still being displayed in SAP Business theme and not in the latest SAP Ui5 theme. So in the index.html, you can find the different configurations in the Bootstrap. And here you can also see that there is this data SAP UI theme called SAP Business. So here we want to choose the latest Fiori theme. So we can say SAP Fiori 3, and we can save that. And now we will use the latest SAP Fiori theme for our Ui5 application. Okay, so next up, we want to create our first view for our application to actually display some controls and some content for our Ui5 application. So I will go to the view folder and will add new file to my views. And I will want to create a new view for my sensor application called sensors.view.xml. Okay. So I will paste in some content and explain that. So here you can see I pasted in an XML view. And in this view, we now defined a view from the model view controller namespace. And we also defined the namespace to the SAP M library, which includes a base set of different kind of controls. And in addition, we also included a page from the SAP M library, defined an ID for it, and also a title. I will come to this step here with a binding expression later on. And also in the content area of this page, we defined an empty icon tab bar. Okay, but now we've created the first view for our application, and we will need to add some dependencies to our application, as we want also in the later steps to include some different kind of controls, such as microcharts and cards. So here we would like to add some more library dependencies to our applications than the standard ones. To do that, we will need to jump to our manifest JSON. And here we can see that we have in the dependencies currently the SAP UI core library, the SAP M library, and the SAP UI layout library. So here in advance, I would like to add the SAP F library. And I would also like to add this SAP Suite UI microchart library. We want to add these dependencies, as later on we want each individual sensor data to be displayed in a microchart, for example. So we will need to add these dependencies to our application. In advance, we've now created our sensors view, but we actually don't have any connection in our Ui5 application yet to our view. But we've configured our routing for our application. So as we are currently in the manifest, we can directly take care of this. And we can see here in the routing that there is some base configuration, which I will override for now. Oops. I will explain that. So here you can see what we did here is we defined the view path in our routing configuration to our sensor manager view, and we also defined a route sensors, and we are using our sensors view that we just created. So currently in our sensors view, we can see we just have an empty icon tab bar, but maybe we can already check with the theme that we've configured and the empty icon tab bar if the application looks different to before. So I will refresh that. And I can see the theme already changed. It looks different to before. It's using the latest SAP Fiori 3 theme. And we can also see in the top that we have this empty icon tab bar being displayed, which is exactly what we defined in the view. So this configuration worked fine so far. And we've successfully created our first view called sensors that is already displaying an empty icon tab bar. Perfect. So now, maybe also as an information regarding the API documentation. For example, if you want to know more about different controls, such as the page, the icon tab bar, also which library offers which kind of control. The demo kit in Ui5 is the central point of information, which is also linked in this exercise that we just finished here. And here you can find all the detailed information about Ui5. You can find the API documentation in the API reference from each library that Ui5 offers. You can also find samples in the samples tab to all controls, such as lists, tables, pop-ups, and so on. And you can also find some documentation in regards of FAQs and more details for the different controls that are offered by Ui5. Okay, but let's jump back to the coding, and we can go to our next exercise. And we actually want to show some sensor content in our Ui5 application. So to start that, we will need actually some data in order to use a JSON model in our application. So to do that, we, as already mentioned, we are not using a data service for this Freestyle application, but we want to focus on the Ui5 controls here. So we will just stick with a local JSON model for now. And in the local service folder, we will create a new file, and this should be called sensors.json.
Martin, can you,
Yes.
when you make the next time the preview, maybe you can also increase there the zooming in the preview tab?
Yes, I
yeah,
will do that.
Thank
okay.
you.
Thank you for letting me know. Okay. So also in the exercises, you can find the sample data from this sensors JSON, which I just pasted in here. And you can see in the sensor JSON, it holds some simple data, and it will hold the information about different customers, and it will also hold an array of different sensor data, which includes different temperatures, the customer names, and the location, and also the temperature log. And also the threshold at the top defines which temperature counts as warm and which temperature counts as hot. So what we want to do is we want to have an overview over our customers and over the different locations, and actually want to check which of the temperatures are actually fine, which are warm, and which may be too hot. Okay, so now we've defined our data for our Ui5 application. Next up, we will need to define a data service in our app. So I will go to the manifest, and what I will need to do is I will need to define a new JSON model. And to do that, we will need to define a new data source. So in our SAP app, in the manifest, we need to enter a data source in the data sources attribute. Call this one sensor source. We have the possibility to define a custom name for our data source. And for the data source, we will also need to define a type, and we will also need to define where we can actually find the data. So for our data source, sensor source, we have a JSON type of data, and we can find this data in the local service folder in our application and the sensors JSON. So now that we defined our sensor source data source, we will need to define an according model that will consume this data source configuration. So we will need to go to SAP Ui5 Configuration, our manifest, and here we can already find this models object. And here we can define a custom model for our application that we can use for data binding. So we will call this model here sensor model, and we can define also here a custom name for our model. But what we will need to do is we will need to reference the data source that we just defined in our SAP app. And we will also need to define a type for our model. And in this case, we of course will use JSON model, which can be found in the SAP UI model JSON namespace. Okay, now that we defined our JSON model, we can actually start to use data in our XML view. So let's jump back to our XML view and as a first step, we will try to display each customer with his location in a simple grid list that we actually have an overview and can check if the connection to our data works. So as a first step, we will need to add some dependencies to our XML view to use them later on. And we will need the CSS grid from the layout namespace. And we also will need the SAPF library. So in the icon tupper, we can find this content aggregation, which will be the main content area of our Ui5 application. And here we would like to display a grid list. And you can see here from the namespace that we just used, from the F namespace, we've just used the grid list control. And we also used the grid box layout from the CSS grid control. And this configuration will basically, this control will basically display a grid list, and we want to display each customer in some kind of grid list layout. And we will also give this an ID in addition. And also we can define a no data text in case something went wrong and we are not able to find any data. Okay, so we can already now take a quick look. I will zoom into the application to make it a little larger, and I will refresh it just to see. Currently we didn't connect any data in our application, but we can already see it looks a little different before that, since we have this empty grid list here in our icon tab bar content. Perfect. So this works already fine, and we don't have any errors that some dependency has not been found. So we've configured everything well so far. Okay, so next up, we actually defined our JSON model in our manifest. We defined our data source in our data, and now we want to create a data binding to our grid list in order to display data. To do that, we actually want to bind the items aggregation of our grid list. To do that, I need to add a binding expression to our grid list. And here you can see what I did here is I copied in this expression to the items aggregation of the grid list. And here you can see in this curly brackets, there is the actual binding expression, and you can see the path is pointing to the sensor model that we just defined in our manifest JSON. And the sensor model has an array of sensors in it, and this is the data that we actually want to display. And in advance, Ui5 offers the possibility to create models, sorters, and filters. And here we can directly sort for the path customer, and we can also say that we want to group this sorting for the different customers. And we can also define if we want to do that ascending or descending in the configuration here. Okay, so next up, we bound our grid list, but for now we would probably just see some empty entries for each of these available entries, as we didn't define any information yet that we want to display from these sensors JSON, such as currently, for example, it would probably make sense to display the different locations. So let's also directly do that. And here we can see in this grid list, there's already a blanked custom list item. I will replace this custom list item for now. And in the custom list item, we have the possibility to enter some custom controls that we want to be displayed in our Ui5 application. And here we want to use the title control, and we want to display the text from the location in the sensor model. So here again, we are using this curly brackets to have a binding expression, and we are pointing this binding expression to our sensor model. Okay, perfect. So I saved that, and I will go back to my sensor manager application, and I will refresh it. And we can already see that this looks already much more detailed than before. We can now see that we have this grid list, we have this grouping with our different customers, and we have these different title controls with the different customer locations. Perfect. So we already created the base layout for our Ui5 application. And with that, we've successfully completed the third step in showing this actual sensor content. You can also find more detailed information about data binding on the demo kit. This can all be found, and also about XML views in general. These are all information that you can find in the documentation if you search for the according terms, such as XML view, or for example, data binding, in case you might want to know about each of these individual steps in more detail. Okay, so next up, we want to introduce localization in the fourth step to our application. Currently, we can see, for example, that in this no data text of the grid list here, for example, we just hard-coded some value no sensors. And in advance, this title from the page is already using some binding to this I18N model, which is being used for the internationalization. So as we don't want any hard-coded language in our application, but we want our application to dynamically use the locale that has been configured by the user, we want to replace all hard-coded strings with a binding expression to our internationalization model. So I will replace this no data text with a binding expression to our I18N model and point it to the property no sensor data text. Okay, so next up, we will need to actually define these internationalization properties. And here you can already see in the application, in the templated project, that there is already a property bundle file created up front, and it already holds some simple information such as title, app, and app description, but it's really generic, and we want our text to have some more details. And I will copy some values that we can use also later on. So these are just some key value pairs of names for our resource bundle and values. For example, as a title, we want to use Keep Cool Sensor Manager, and we want to have a different app title, a different app description, and also later on, we will need some more texts that we can use for our UI5 application. So I already now want to check if this works. And in the manifest, you could see we already up front, we had this I18N model, which is of type resource model and which is already referring to this pre-configured property bundle file. So basically that I just created a binding into this model in the XML view. We would basically already now be able, if we refresh this application, to hopefully see that the title has changed. Perfect. Then we can see at the top, we have Keep Cool Sensor Manager, just as we defined it in our model. Perfect. So this works fine. Next up, we want to add additional languages to see if we can switch between different languages. And the proper way to do this would be to start off with creating a new property file. I'll call this one I18N, and we will start off with English.
Martin, are you still there?
Martin, you're not sharing anymore?
I'm very sorry. I think my connection broke for a few seconds.
Okay, no problem. Just reconnect.
I will start sharing again. Okay, Florian, could you quickly confirm if you can see my screen?
Yes, it's there.
Okay, perfect. I am very sorry for that. I'm not actually sure what happened here. Okay, so hopefully the last step you could see was the new property for the different language. So we'll create a new property file. Okay, perfect. So I was creating an English property file, and as our default is already in English, I can just use the same for now. The general guideline here is to have these different locales with an underscore ending, which is why I already, as we're now configuring a second language, also configured the CN properties file. And as we don't just want English properties, but we also want, for example, German properties, but you would basically be free also if you do this course by your own, which locales you want to support for your applications. You could basically just enhance this with any additional locale that you want to use in your Ui5 Freestyle application. So I am creating a second properties file. And here, actually, I don't want the texts to be English after it has been created. But actually here, I want to have German texts. And here I will call it Keep Cool Sensor Verwalter instead of Keep Cool Sensor Manager in the German language. And now it's depending on the browser language that has been configured, which of these locales is actually being used. And next up in the manifest, we want to actually define which locales are supported in our application. So here in the manifest, you can see in this internationalization model that we have the bundle in the settings, the bundle defined, and here we can also define the supported languages for our application. And here, as we defined an English and the German property file, we want to support the locales DE and EN for German and English. And in advance, we also want to define a fallback locale, and this should be the English locale. Okay, so now, as we defined this, we can actually now check again if our application is still showing the English locale, and this works fine. And if you want to test now, for example, different locales in your application, you can use the parameter SAP UI language. And here I want to use D for German to test if the German locale works. And I can see the title changed according to Sensor Verwalter instead of Sensor Manager. Okay, perfect. So our internationalization works fine. And also the German property file that we configured works fine. But for now, I will go back to the English locale as we want our application to work in English for now. Perfect. So you can also check, for example, by putting in other locales if they are supported, and if there's an unsupported locale, it will just use English as the configured fallback in our manifest JSON. So with that, we've successfully completed the fourth exercise to introduce localization. And of course, also more information about localization can be found in the demo kit, which is also linked in the GitHub documentation of this workshop, if you want to search for some more content afterwards. Next up, we want to improve the visualization in the fifth step for our Ui5 Freestyle application, as this still might not look too nice to have these texts in the upper left corner. So we want to add some more content to our XML view of our application. So to do that, we will need to add some more dependencies to our XML view. And in advance here, we want to add the core library in our XML view. So every time we want to use different controls from different libraries in our XML view, we will need to define the according namespace to actually point to the namespace and which control we want to use. And here, currently we defined this custom list item, which is basically taking care of displaying this content here. And currently this doesn't look too nice as it's just some text without any styling. So we want to actually use some layout controls and some styling for our custom list item. So here we have the possibility for our custom list item to define a layout data. And in advance, we want to make use of horizontal boxes and vertical boxes. These boxes can be used to define different set of properties, such as justify content, where you have different possibilities to use, for example, space between. And you also have the possibility to define style classes for these flexbox controls. And you can define, for example, small margins, that the content, for example, doesn't look like this anymore, but that we can center some content and have it being displayed nice. And in advance, we don't just want to display the location, but we also want to display the distance in kilometers, for example. And also, as we are displaying sensor data in our application to manage different sensors, we also want a temperature icon being displayed that we can use later on to make it look a little, to make it look nicer than just some plain text. Okay, so I will save that for now. And next up, as we now created some more content for our view, we might also want to do some additional things, as for example, coloring the temperature icons that we can, for example, track which of the sensor data is actually fine, which is maybe too warm, and which temperature is actually too hot, maybe with like blue, orange, and red colors, that we can directly see which of these entries in each of these lists is fine, or which might be checked in more detail. So as UI5 is driven in the model view controller concept. We are currently just defining the base controls for our application in the sensors view. So next up, we want to create a controller to actually enhance our application with JavaScript coding. So as similar to the view that we created, we want to create a controller for our sensors view. So we will go to the controller folder and create a new file called sensors controller. What we want to do in our sensors controller, we actually want to extend from the model view controller. And to do that, we can use the SAP Ui5 define loader to actually load different kind of modules in our JavaScript controller. And here we have the possibility in the callback of this define to actually use the modules that we've loaded in the define array here at the top. And here we want to extend from our controller, and we also want to give it an according namespace. And here we have the possibility to use different lifecycle functions of the controller, but for now we will just use the onInit method for our controller. But as you might want to use some different controls in our controller, we will also add 2 more controls that we can actually use. And that is from the core library, the icon color, as we want to color our icons that we added in our XML view. And also we want to use a message toast that we can display once the data has been successfully loaded. As we've added these paths here, we will also need to add these modules that have been loaded in the according callback, and that is icon color and that is message toast. And perfect. So now what we want to do is we want to actually check if our sensor data has been fully initialized. So here we will define a second method in our controller and call this method getSensorModel. And here what we basically want to do is we want to take the owner component, our application, and we want to use the function getModel. And here we can pass a string which should point to our model that we defined in our manifest. And here we can just say sensor model, as this is the model that we've defined. As we now have a method to actually work with our model, we want in the onInit method to now also work with this model. And what we want to do is once our application started, we want to use the model that we basically grab in this getSensorModel method. And we want to use the data loaded method to actually listen to the promise that we can show a message toast once the data has been successfully loaded. And also here you can see we will use the internationalization and the resource text. And we also already have a text here called message sensor data loaded, which we can also find in our property bundle file that we want to display a toast in our application once the data has been loaded. Perfect. So now we've defined a controller, which takes care of some JavaScript coding already. And we will now need to connect this controller to our XML view. And to do that, we will need to add the controller name to our XML view. And we can define this at the top by stating controller name. And we will need to add the according name that we defined in our controller extension here. And this is the name that we defined here. Keep pool, sensor manager, controller sensors. And you can see this is what we point to the controller name. So now we've done some steps. We basically enhanced our XML view, and we also added some JavaScript coding to our controller to display a message toast once the data has been loaded. So what we want to do is we want to refresh our application and check if these steps are working as expected. And perfect, we can see the message toast from the controller coding, which states all sensors are online. And we can also see that we now have the icons that we added in our XML view, and we have not just the location, but we also have the distance from our JSON model, and it already looks much better than before. Okay, so next up, we want to use the data from the JSON model, which also holds some temperature logs in order to color these different icons that we have in our grid list, as we want to display them in a default bluish color if they are fine, or maybe orange for too warm, and in red if they are too hot. So to do that, we want to create a formatter function. And to do this, we will go to our controller and we will add a new function, and we can call this format icon color. This format icon color function should basically be called in the binding and get the temperature from the temperature log of the JSON model. And as our sensor model in the sensor data is defining a threshold for warm and too hot, we can make use of that and actually compare the value which is in each individual data set, and we can compare it with the threshold and either return the icon color neutral if the temperature is okay, or we can define a critical color, and we can actually format this here. So, but now as we want to actually format our icon color, we just defined the formatter in our controller, but we don't have any connection to this function from our XML view. So what we will need to do is we will need to go to our sensors view, and we will actually need to call our formatter. And we can see here in the icon that we defined, which is displaying this little temperature icon, that there is no color defined for our icon, which is why it's always displayed in the default black color. So here we want to add a binding for the color, similar as we did it, for example, to the distance text, for example. What we are doing here in comparison to the other binding expression is we are defining the path to the temperature and to the value in the sensor model. But in advance, we are adding a formatter. And this formatter here in Ui5 offers the possibility with this point notation to access functions from your controller. And here we want to make use of the function format icon color. Okay, so now we created a formatter. We also point to this formatter in our XML view. And I will go back to the application and I will refresh it, and we want to check if this actually works. And you can see that it looks more colorful than before. Now we can already see which of these individual entries are too hot and which of these are not, which is exactly what we wanted to do here. Perfect. So compared to the last exercise, this looks already much more cleaned up than before. And we will continue with the next step. And now we already created some sorting via binding expression. We also made use of a formatter in Ui5 via binding expression to dynamically color these icons and individually binding these. So what you want to do up next is we also want to make use of filtering, because right now we just have an overview over all these different sets, but it might be difficult to get an overview of which of these different iSources are fine, which are not. So it would be nice to have a filtering for the blue ones, for the orange ones, and also for the red ones. So to do that, we can go to our XML view, and we can see we currently have this icon tab bar defined, but currently we are not using actually some icon tabs in our icon tab bar, but we are just filling the content area of this icon tab bar. So besides the content aggregation, we also have an items aggregation in our icon tab bar. And here we have the possibility to provide different icon tab filters. So you can see here that we now defined an icon tab filter to show all, which is also pointing to all text in our property bundle. And also we can see that we have defined 3 different icon tab filters. So we have one with a fridge icon, one with a blur icon, and one with a warning icon. And these are also using the according color that we used in our formatter function, our controller, to display these icons in the according color. And we can also give these different icon tab filters a key. that we can make programmatically use of later on. Okay, so but before we actually start to implement some controller coding, we want to check if we can see the icons that we just added. You can see now at the top, this is just what you defined in the items aggregation of our icon topper. We have a cold, warm, and too hot icon top filter. And you can see it already looks nice, but it's not connected with any functionality. So if I click here, it actually doesn't filter the grid list as you might expect it. Okay, so as we've done that, we actually want to enhance our controller coding. And for our controller coding, what we want to use is a model filter. So in our define, we will need to load the module SAP UI model filter. And we also need to enhance our callback provided. And here we want to add the filter as module name, that we can actually work with the filter and create different model filters. So now we want to create an event handler that if we click on these icons here, we actually want to execute some logic. So to do that, and we will start with creating a function, and let's call this function on sensor select. As this is a little more coding, I will paste this for now and explain what it will do. So this coding basically will use will make use of the event that is being passed every time the icons are being pressed. And here what we want to do is we want to make use of the threshold that is being defined in our model that basically states what is warm and what is hot, or which is fine. And we can use the key which is being passed as parameter in this event here to actually create the according model filter. So we created these icon tab filters with a cold key, with a warm key, and with a hot key. And every time this event is being executed, we actually know which of these icon tab filters is being pressed. So here we will create a new filter based on the selected key by the user. And depending on if it's cold, warm, or hot, we will create a different filter. And we will basically need to point to the according model entry, which can be found in temperature value. And we can use these different operators such as less than, between, and greater than. And we can make use of these different thresholds to actually check which filter needs to be created. And once these different filters have been created, we can make use of the filter function on the binding and pass in these model filters to actually trigger a filter on the binding. Perfect. So now we've created the on-sensor select event handler for our icon topper. But currently, this is just a function which is never being executed. So we need to go at sensors view, and we will actually need to trigger this event handler in case some event is being executed. So at the icon topper, there's an event called select, and we can pass in, similar to the formatter, this function by using the point notation, and can call our function that we just defined on sensor select. Okay, so let's go back to our application and check if our event handler is being executed as expected. If I go now to the application, I press, for example, cold, warm, or hot, I can see that I can only see the entries that I have selected. And if I go back to all, I can see all entries again. Perfect, so the model filter is working as expected. And you already have a nice overview over the different sensor data. So next up, we also can see that it's currently not too nice that there is just this alt text, which is not giving us any information about how many sensors there actually are. So in advance, what we want to do is we want to use an expression binding in our icon tab filter. And here we actually want, in the first one, which is responsible for this alt text, we want to use the count property. And here we want to use the expression binding. You can see it's a little different compared to the other bindings that we created with this quotation $mark. And we can see here that we have the possibility to use some basic operations, such as, for example, length, to basically check how many entries are there in the model. And now, if I save that and if I refresh that again, we can see that there are 100 entries that are being displayed as of now. And you have the possibility with these expression binding expressions to do simple math operations on the binding. There's also a documentation referenced on which operations and how they can be implemented using expression bindings. Okay, so with that, we've created the simple and setup for our application, which is already capable of displaying some data in a bound list and also sorting it accordingly using a formatter and also using an icon tupper for filtering. With that, we've completed the first half of this course. I will stop the sharing for now. And I would hand over to you, Florian.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Martin, for the first half and for the first basic app, which is now developed. So now I will share my screen. So Martin, would be nice if you can just confirm that the
I can
screen
see
is
the
shared.
screen.
Perfect. Nice. So yeah, so we will now continue with the exercise. And now let's make a little preview here to show if it's how it looks like at the moment. So we had now nice filtering option on the home screen, but now it's time to provide much more personalization in our application, and this can be achieved by adding a personalization dialog here, and therefore let's switch to the IDE. And if you're creating dialogues, the best thing is it's the best candidate in fragments, because the fragment are usable artifacts which you can include in multiple views and multiple controllers to be used. And therefore, let's go there, view folder, create a new file, and we call it customer select dialog.fragment.xml. So now we have it. And now we want to include in this dialog the possibility to select one or multiple customers. And then the home screen should be filtered with the selected ones. So therefore, let's generate a valid definition. And in this case, we have to include two namespaces here. First of all, the default namespace, it's a personal, you can choose any preferred namespace, what you want. I use in the most of the cases the M library as the default namespace, because the most of the controls are at the moment located in this library, and some basic artifacts which like the view, like the fragment, they are included in the core library. Okay, so now we have the fragment definition here, and now we add a dialog and select dialog here. And this select dialog has many options how you can configure it. First of all, we want to include a title. And then the title, because we are building enterprise applications, we want to use the I18N feature. And also here we can use this title customer select, which is already in place in the I18N file. Not this one, it's the title select customer. And yeah, so then we want to specify a content height. And for this case, we choose a relative value. Then we want that our selections are remembered. So if you open it twice, then the selected ones should still be selected. Now we want to bind which values should be selected. We want to include the customers. And therefore, we choose the items aggregation, and here we can use the binding syntax here, and we want to bind the items against the customers. And we want to sort them because it's easier to read if you know that the list is sorted. So because we want to show the customer name, we also pass we sort the value to the customer name. Okay, so that's done. So now we have the aggregation binding, but we have to add a template there. And a template look like that. At the moment we use a standard list item for that. It's the most basic control for such lists, and we specify the title here. And the title, it's located in the sensor model, and it's located on the name property of the customer entity. Perfect. Say that, it's done. So we have the fragment. So it's nice that we have it, but now we have to implement the logic to include the fragment into our application. At the moment, we have two possibilities to include fragments in Ui5. Either you include the fragment directly in the view, then the fragment is loaded together with the view, or you want to load the fragment while you're using the app. So there might be scenarios where you want to where you say, okay, this is really rare that the end user is using such a specific feature. Then it might be better to not load the fragment at the beginning. If you have a fragment where you know that 99% of the users are using this fragment, then it might be better to include it directly into the view. In our case, we want to use the asynchronous feature to load the fragment, and therefore we go to our sensors controller, and we add a new method, and it's called onCustomerSelect, and we use now the latest fragment coding, and therefore we say, okay, is there already a fragment defined? Do we have already loaded the dialog or not? And if the dialog does not exist, we load it, and therefore we use the fragment .load API, and here you can pass multiple parameters. We have to use a type, and it's an XML fragment, so we type XML, and then we have to specify the name. And the name, it's how you can get them named really easily from your controller, where you say, hey, keep cool. Here's still, I think here's still an issue with this called manager. Sensor. Now we have, it's not in the controller folder, it's in the view folder, right? And we have here customer select dialog. And you see now we have a red highlighting. Why is this red? And the TypeScript functionality of Ui5 already highlights now that the fragment is not imported correctly here. And yeah, we have no fragment here, so we have to add it here. So we have to import it and add it here as a parameter. And now it's there. So what's missing? We want to use some controller functions inside of the fragment. So we have to assign this controller to this fragment. And with that, we load now the fragment. But loading is not enough because we say, okay, if it's a promise, if the fragment is loaded, we get the dialog. And in that case, we want to add we want to pass the model, which is in the view, to the dialog. So go there, say set model. And now we can use here, we can use here this. I know there are multiple options to use this. Some developers are more familiar with using the that is equal this and use the that feature, but in some scenarios, I think it makes sense to use the bind this. And here you can now call this get sensor model function and simply pass it to the dialog. Set a new value. Also, we want to consume the I18N model. Therefore, we have to use this dot get view get model I18N, and we name it also I18N on the dialog. Then we want to enable the multi-select feature in the dialog. Set multi-select. It's true. We could also add this to the XML definition. It's only that you see that you can set some values here, or you can set it inside the XML. And afterwards, we want to pass the dialog to the XML to the next promise chain. Okay, so you have now created the dialog, and looks good. And now you can go there and say, okay, if the dialog is now there, we have to simply open the dialog. And here we can go, say, oh, dialog, and then simply open it. Wow, okay, a little bit coding there, but it's fully async here in that case, and it should run. So let's see here, sensor manager, it's correct. Then we have to rename that here also. Let's copy and paste error from my side. Okay. Okay. So we have that. And now we have to sign this on customer select function somewhere where that this function can be executed. And therefore and at the moment we have no header placed in this page. So we can use the header content aggregation. Oops. And inside of the header, we use it simply in a sub and button and with a nice icon. Let me choose the menu icon and Then we use press, and inside of the press, we simply say our newly created function. Oh. Okay, and we define a tooltip. Okay. Now the button should be there. Let's see if it works. What we've developed now. Connection broke here. Let's see if it works. Okay, button is placed in the header. Now we click on, oh, it's not open. We did it wrong. Okay, so there are still some issues with loading this fragment. Yeah, there's an S too much in our file name. Let's see, sensor manager. It is not sensors manager. Let's see if it works now. Yes, the dialog is there and it's loaded asynchronously and we see the data. Perfect. So now we can select someone that's already provided by the control. You can select and you also get information how many items you have selected there. Also, there's a search input field place where you can search, but you see nothing happened. And now it's time for us to implement this search. And therefore, we go back and we implement another function here, which we call on customer select change. And here now we get the value. And we have here an event available. Get the event. And inside of the event, we have every time if you get a Ui5 event, you have the option to call get parameter. And inside of that, in this event, we have the parameter value, which is provided by this input field. And now we can generate a Ui5 filter based on this value. So we create a filter, and the filter is on the name property of the data, and we use the contains filter. You see now I use the string, the hard-coded string feature inside of the filter. It would be also possible that we include the sub UI model filter type feature. So this would be also possible, sub UI model, and then just if you go there to the Ui5 SDK and search for filter type, you would see that the model has a filter type and all, not this is the correct one, filter operator, sorry, the filter operator. And here you have all the different filter operators available. So between, contains, equals. So we could also use this feature only to show that this is also possible. And I would recommend to use it like that, because now with that you're using the Ui5 provided enums for such things. And then you can go there and say contains. You pass the value which is offered by the input field, And to actual filter something, we have to get the binding. And binding is accessible via O event get source. With that, you get the source control, which fired the event. And now we want to get the binding. And the binding is the aggregation binding, which is available on the items aggregation name. Said that, we have the binding, and we can filter them. It's also on code style that you can also pass the filter directly to the filter function. But if you want to pass multiple filters, you have to use the array notation. And in my practice, I use the most of the time. I use directly the array. So if I want to add later point and another filter, I can add it easily. But it's also again a code style and what you prefer. Okay, so now we have added the filtering. So let's assign this filtering to our dialog. Therefore, let's go to the dialog, and here we can go to the view, to the dialog, and there we have an opportunity to say live change and assign on customer select change. Okay, reload and see if we can execute a search. Okay, so now we have an issue because we have not a valid XML fragment anymore. What I have did. That's live coding. Okay, live change. That's correct. Let's try it again. If I did something wrong in the controller. Yeah, it's not here. That's correct. Okay, what? Yeah, maybe I had included here the wrong file. Yeah, you see what I have included the filter operator, but I changed here, and that's very important. The order is in the same way as we have it here when we name it, and was the reason. Perfect. So now load it. Okay, it's here, and now we search for MA, and you see filtering works. We have it implemented. Cool. So now filtering is working. You can clear the filter. You can select multiple, but what you cannot do, or it's not implemented yet, to press the select button, because then nothing happened. Select is pressed, but dialog is closed, but nothing happens. So now we want to filter our home screen to the newly selected customers. And yeah, let's do that. Back to here. And we have here a confirm property. And here we say, okay, we create a new one, which is called on customer select confirm. And here we have to create this new function. Okay, we have the event. And we have to get the binding. This time we want to get the binding from the sensor list. We have it. So now we have to get the key, which is inside of the parameter. And we have to get the threshold. Oh, sorry, I have mixed up what we want to do, because this one we have already implemented in the top. Here we have only to do some minor adjustments. So this is something really straightforward, where we have to get the selected items. And have it. Then we have to get the binding. And we have to get the binding. Get binding, and it's available on the items. Okay, so we have now we have the binding. Now we have to build for every selected customer a new filter. Therefore, we can choose the array map function and say every time for every item, for every customer which is selected, we want to create a new filter. And it's the filtered operator dot equal, and it's we want to filter to the title. Okay. Now we have built the filter, the filter, and we have to execute a filter. And therefore, we have to take the binding, execute the filter function, and now there's a little change here, because we have now two filters, right? We have the filter, with the icon tab bar, which we have in place here when you're switching the tab, and now we have an additional filter which is searching for the customer name. If we now would only pass our newly created filters, we would lose our old filters regarding the state of the temperature, and therefore we have to merge these filters, the new ones, with the old ones, and therefore we have to use this.a status filters. And because it could be that you search for customers before the other filters are created, or in the other way around, we have to initialize both filters when the controller is created. And therefore, go there, say, please create an empty array inside of them. And then we have it. Okay, so now we did that. And what we also want to do is we have now the other filter function. When you remember, here we have to also merge both filters. Okay, saved. Let's try. Go to the home screen, reload. And now let's stay here and select, we only want to have Matro and Aldi. Select. And you see we have only Matro and Aldi. So now let's execute a second filtering. We only want to see the warm ones. And you see, oh, still there are more shown than before. And it's good here. We see now only this one. So the first search was not correct. So have a look there. If we have there any typo. That's the reason, right? We cleaned the filters on the beginning of the select. So if we want that the customer search is remembered, we have to do that. If we want to see that the customer search is this is also remembered, then we can do it like that. Execute now the customer here, only Matro and Aldi. Select Matro Aldi, switch to warm, and you see now only Matro and Aldi is there. So that's something how you can decide how you want it. Leave it like that. Okay, nice. Now we have the exercise 7 completed, and you see filtering in Ui5 is a huge topic, but it's quite powerful and it can achieve a lot of things. Now it's time for bring more detailed data to the view. At the moment, we have only this overview page where we can filter and have an overview, but now we want to, and you know it, yeah. It's the cold ones. Are not interesting for the customer because all is fine with them. We want to see, hey, what's happening on this warm and too hot instances, and therefore we want to navigate to this special sensor and to see how the temperature is evolved in the last time. Therefore, we create another view. Go there, create a file, call it sensor.view.xml, sensor status, sorry, .view.xml. Now we have a new view, and this view is at the moment really simple. We have scan, it's an MVC view, and we say display block. True, this is that the view is taking the whole screen in our UI. We don't have subviews or anything else included. And then we have to include the MVC package, MVC library. And our default library, it's again the SAP library. And that's it. Closing the MVC view. And including a simple SAP page. And say we want to show the navigation button to navigate back to our home view. Okay, so let's see. We have now only created the view, but we have not included any navigation or anything how this view can be accessed. Therefore, we have to add another route into our manifest configuration. So let's go to the manifest configuration, to routing configuration. And here you see at the moment we have only one route. Let's add another route there, which is called route status. route sensor status, and it's pointing to the target sensor status. Target sensor status is not there, so we have to create it. And I can also copy there because developers are lazy. We say simply the view ID is now sensor status, and the view name is sensor status. And our view level is the second one because we navigate to forward and backward. Okay. Let's see if this works. So what I have did wrong is I have defined an empty pattern, and we have now two routes with the empty pattern. So we have to specify here a specific pattern for this route. So, okay, I want to have a sensor, and then I want to specify a dedicated index of this sensor. And with that, I have to use this curly brackets, and with that, I can pass parameters into the view, into the route. So let's see. Make a reload. Load it. Now we make a hash, write sensor, and write slash. Now we say simply 1, 2, and you see now we navigate to the detail page, to the sensor status page, but nothing is displayed here because we now have nothing included. That's a good thing. So let's implement this navigation that we can come from this page to the detail, to the status page. Therefore, we have to go to the controller of the sensors controller file, and we have to create a new function, which is called nav2 sensor status. And here we can simply call can get the event and say, hey, this is, I want to get the ID of the index of this the sensor. Therefore, I can call event, get source, get binding context, pass the model name. Then we have the binding context, and here we can now execute the function get property, and we want to know the property called index. Okay, looks good. Now let's call the router. Owner component, get router, and call the nav2. And here we just pass the route name, which is called sensor status, and we pass now the index to the route. Okay. That's now we have the function, but now it's time to assign this function to our sensors view to one of the items, right? So therefore we can go to the custom list item, and here we have another available function handler assigned. And with that, it's quite easy. Reload the page. Let's see what happened. Click, and yes, we are navigating from our main view to the sensor status view with the hash in place. And if you now make a reload on this view, you're directly redirected to this view. Perfect. So now this page is really empty. So let's make it's empty, and we have the nav back button not implemented. So first, let's fix this the back navigation. Therefore, we go to our newly created view, and here we have no controller assigned. So let's add here a new controller, and because we are lazy, we go there and see how it's done the first view here and replace it. And now we have to generate a new controller, which is called sensor status, and we go to the new controller folder, add a new controller, and we can simply copy here also the syntax. Here, at the moment we need nothing, only the controller. Okay, now we have that. And we have to specify the return, which I have already here. And rename it sensor status. Okay, now we have that. When we make now a reload, we would see nothing. So let's directly add this nav to sensor function. And we navigate to our defined route sensor. Okay, now we have the nav to sensor. Let's assign this nav to sensor function to our newly created sub M page, where we have the button, and here let's have enough. We have another property which is called nav button press. Assign it here. Sometimes you see people using the function without a dot here. It's the same. So we are doing the Ui5 will take care of mapping this function, but I would not. We can say it's code style. So if you want to highlight that's a function, you can use this dot notation. If not, it will also work. Okay, let's reload. So now we are at the sensor status, nav back, and we are here. You see, it worked. Perfect. Really nice. So with that, we have created. We have the exercise 8 finished. So let's add some more color to this detail view, because it's quite empty, and therefore we are using the SAP Ui5 Card feature. It's a new control which comes directly in Ui5, or if you want to use it more integrated in S4 or in other systems, you can use Ui5 integration cards. That's a separate topic. Lots of blog posts are available on that. In our case now, we will use only the Ui5 control, which is quite basic and simple. Therefore, we go to our view, sensor status view, add a new library, which is called SAP, and also the cards library, which is placed also in the F namespace. SAP cards. Okay, both namespaces are now available. So go to the page. Let's go to the page. And for layouting reasons, we add now in the content aggregation of the page a nice VBox. And to boost a little bit our time, because we are a little bit late, go there and copy the value here. Simply because we want to show that the deployment to cloud is possible. And yes, go there, paste it. So now we have this. Good. No copy and paste error. That's also not nice. Something happened here with the types. Okay, let's try that. Okay, doesn't matter. We can simply use it. Close the content and close the card. And let's see if the document formatting is working. It's not working. Oh, that's bad. Live coding. /open. /open. So somehow we did there in wrong XML. Okay, I don't see it. Let's do it all the way, step by step. Okay. Okay, Ui box is closed. And now we can format the document. And you see we have using now in the header, we're using a nice possibility to pass multiple values into our binding. So we have now, we call it not path, it's parts. So and you can pass an array. So now multiple values are passed inside of this binding. And we use a formatter to format such kind of values. And therefore, we go to our status controller and import this. It's located under sub base strings. And then here we have this module available. And with this module, it's a powerful module because it does a lot of work for you. And this one here, we've imported it. Now we have to add it here as a member. And with that, it's available in the view. Okay, so we have it. Let's see if this formatting works. It would work, but we have no bind available. That means we have to enable the data which is coming from one view to the other one. And therefore, we have to use the onInit function and say this dot get owner component get router attach route get route. We have to first get a route. We want to react when the specific route is matched, and in that case, we want to react when the route sensor status is matched, and we say, hey, attach matched. And here we assigning it on matched and assign context to that. Okay, have it. Now let's route matched. View. Want to bind this view now, select the sensor from the first view. Therefore, we execute bind element and can pass here binding information. This is the path. And now we have to build the correct binding path on it. Sensors. We have here an event available because we want to get the routing parameters. Arguments which are available on the event object, and we want to get the index value from that route. Got the model, and the model is the sensor model. Okay, and here we have got the S. Nice. So now when the is matched, we get the selected sensor from the URL, and then we bind our view to this model and to this specific sensor. Okay. So let's see. So we have selected sensor 7 here. Nice. So our customer name is displayed in the correct way. So we have label customer and we have our parameter, which is the customer name in our in our data. So when we go there, what I have used, so we have used now this format message module. And if you go to the I18N text, we will see in the English properties that we use for this one, we use this card title and we use a variable which is placed inside of the I18N value. And with that, this format message function is possible to pass a value inside of the I18N text, and you can customize that. There are multiple options. You can pass multiple parameters. At a later point in time, in this course you see that you have multiple parameters which can be passed there, and in that case we use this one parameter showing the customer as a label, and then the data which come from the model. Really nice feature, and it's quite powerful in because you can use I18N plus values which coming from model. So now we are we have to a little bit hurry, and so that's the reason why we will still do now the cloud deployment, but with the actual state of the app. So we have still lots of more, one more exercise which makes lots more color into our detail page. But you can do it afterwards your own and pimp your app to make it much more awesome. So let's deploy this app now to the cloud. Therefore, we have to do some adjustments. First of all, we have to go to our manifest JSON and sorry, to our Ui5 YAML. And because we are using a local service here, we are using our data from a local service file. We have to remove this local service folder from the build result. Because in active scenarios, you don't need the test folder, you don't need the local service folder. This is the reason why it was included here automatically from their web ID. from the SAP Business Application Studio. So just remove it here. And also we want to enable that if you call the root URL of the deployed application, that it's automatically redirected to this app. Therefore, we go to the manifest JSON, copy the sub app ID, and go to the app router folder, here to our XS app JSON, and specify here a welcome file, paste it, move the dot, that's important, because the app router does not understand the dot, save, and with that, we can go to the other file, which is already configured by the TechEd, by the SAP Application Studio for you. Make a right click and say build MTA. With that, now the SAP Business Application Studio is executing the MTAR build. So it uses the multi-target build tool. And you can see now it executing npm install. It does verifications on that side, and it generates the MTAR archive. And this MTAR archive is then placed inside of the folder. Let's see, it's still running. Let's make that a little bit smaller. Now the Ui5 tooling is executed to build the Ui5 resources. Okay, MTAR is created here. And before we can deploy now, we have to log into our Cloud Foundry space. Therefore, go there, type CF, and type login to Cloud Foundry. Yes, we want to deploy our application to the EU landscape. My email address is this one. My password, this one. So now we are logged into Cloud Foundry. Now we have to choose the organization, this one, and we have already created a space in Cloud Foundry for that. Perfect. Now we are logged into Cloud Foundry and to our space. And now we can simply right-click on the MTAR archive and execute deploy MTAR archive. It uses now the configuration, which is inside of our Business Application Studio, and deploying the app to this space. So when I go to my SAP Cloud platform, you see now I have this trial account, and I have Cloud Foundry spaces. And I have my space here. At the moment, I have no application here. One is stopped. This is one already, which I only deploying here. So it says, okay, I have already uploaded the application, and now it's starting the app router. Take some time. And after this step, we will now have then the URL which we can use to access our deployed application. So let's see. Okay, application is staged. Now application starts. And there is, yeah, now it's there. Here, app router, and you can go open a new tab, execute, and let's see what happens. It's still there. Still not finished, but we have the URL already. Okay, so now reload. We are redirected.
Florian?
Yes. Yep.
Just wanted to make you aware that we have just a couple of minutes left.
Yes, with that, I'm already also finished now. You see now the application is deployed in the cloud and you can exit it. And yeah, we have still some things in pedo, so you can go to the GitHub and have a look on that to exercise 9 and 10 and see how far you come. And we're really enjoying this course with you. And now I think we got a lot of questions and we will answer them afterwards and provide the answers also there in the GitHub repository for you.
Perfect. So thank you very much for holding this amazing session, Martin and Florian. And we hope that you've enjoyed the session as well as I did, and have a great rest of the day. And as Florian just mentioned, all of the questions that you have raised will be answered soon. And yeah, thank you for joining. Have a great day.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.